The morning light filtered through the kitchen window as David Martinez carefully packed 2 lunch boxes, each one a masterpiece of nutrition and love. 80-year-old Emma bounced on her toes beside him, her dark curls still messy from sleep, while 6-year-old Sophia sat at the table, methodically eating her oatmeal 1 spoonful at a time. "You remembered to put the apple slices in the special container so they don't get brown, right, Daddy?" Emma asked, pressing her face against his arm to peek into her lunchbox. "Of course, Mija," David smiled, ruffling her hair. "And your sister's sandwich is cut into triangles, just how she likes it." Sophia looked up with serious brown eyes that reminded him so much of their mother. "Will you pick us up after school today, or is it Mrs. Chen again?" "I'll be there," David promised, crouching down to meet her gaze. "Right at 3:15, same as always." The school pickup line was where he first noticed her watching them. Rebecca Walsh sat in her pristine white SUV 3 cars ahead, always perfectly put together even at 3 in the afternoon. Her blonde hair never seemed out of place, her makeup never smudged despite the Texas heat. She was everything David wasn't, everything his life couldn't accommodate anymore. "Where in the world are you watching from right now? What time is it where you are?" This story is about the unexpected moments that change everything. Emma burst through the school doors first, backpack bouncing, Sophia trailing behind with her careful, measured steps. They climbed into his 10-year-old Honda with the practiced ease of routine, chattering about their day as he navigated the familiar streets toward home. "Mrs. Patterson said we might have a science fair next month," Emma announced. "Can we do something with volcanoes, Daddy? Everyone always does volcanoes." "We could do something different," David suggested. "What about growing crystals, or testing which materials make the best insulation?" From the rearview mirror, he caught Sophia's thoughtful expression. "Could we do something about stars, Daddy? You know so much about stars." David's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. "Maybe, sweetheart. We'll see what the requirements are." That evening, after homework was checked and dinner dishes were washed, after stories were read and teeth were brushed, David sat alone in his small living room. The apartment was quiet except for the soft hum of the air conditioner and the distant sound of traffic. On the coffee table sat a stack of bills, a reminder of the careful calculations that governed every aspect of their lives. His phone buzzed with a text from his supervisor at the landscaping company. "Early start tomorrow," the message read. "Big commercial job downtown." David set the phone aside and rubbed his tired eyes. Tomorrow would be another day of trimming hedges and planting flowers, of nodding politely when clients barely acknowledged his presence, of coming home with dirt under his fingernails and grass stains on his work clothes. It was honest work, work that paid the bills and kept food on the table, but it wasn't the life he had once imagined for himself. Rebecca Walsh had been watching the Martinez family for 3 weeks now, not out of idle curiosity, but with the calculating precision she brought to every major decision in her life. At 34, she had built a successful marketing consultancy from nothing, owned a beautiful home in the suburbs, and maintained the kind of polished exterior that commanded respect in boardrooms. What she didn't have was the one thing that seemed to matter most to her aging parents and judgmental sister, a family. The idea had started as a whisper in the back of her mind during another awkward family dinner where her mother's pointed questions about grandchildren grew more persistent. Rebecca needed a solution, something practical and mutually beneficial. David Martinez, she had observed, needed financial stability. She needed the appearance of domestic contentment. It was a Tuesday afternoon when opportunity presented itself. Rebecca had deliberately parked closer to the school entrance, timing her arrival to coincide with David's. She watched him emerge from his Honda, straightening his work shirt, running a hand through his dark hair. Even in his landscaping uniform, grass-stained and worn from honest labor, there was something about his posture that spoke of quiet dignity. Emma and Sophia bounded toward him with the unrestrained joy that only children could manage, and Rebecca felt an unexpected pang watching the way his face transformed when he saw them. Pure love, uncomplicated and fierce. "David," Rebecca called out, stepping from her SUV with practiced confidence. "Do you have a minute?" He turned, surprise flickering across his features. "Mrs. Walsh, right. Of course. Rebecca," she corrected, extending her hand. "I was wondering if we could talk sometime. About the girls, actually. I've noticed how well-behaved they are, how happy. You're doing an incredible job as a single parent." David's expression grew cautious. "Thank you," he said simply. "I mean it," Rebecca continued, her voice warming with what sounded like genuine admiration. "In my line of work, I meet a lot of people who talk about work-life balance, but you actually live it. Your daughters clearly adore you." "They're everything to me," David replied, his voice soft but firm. That evening, Rebecca sat in her pristine kitchen, surrounded by granite countertops and stainless steel appliances that rarely saw use beyond reheating takeout. She had spent the day researching David Martinez through the careful networking that had made her business successful. He was 31, widowed 2 years ago when his wife died in a car accident. Before that tragedy, he had been pursuing a master's degree in engineering while working part-time. After Maria's death, he had dropped out to focus entirely on his daughters, taking whatever work he could find that offered flexibility for school pickups and sick days. The more she learned, the more convinced she became that her idea wasn't just practical, it was perfect. David needed financial security and someone to help shoulder the enormous responsibility of single parenthood. She needed a ready-made family and a man whose character was already proven through his dedication to his children. Rebecca pulled out her laptop and began drafting what she mentally called her proposal. Not the romantic kind that her sister had received with tears and champagne, but a business proposal that made sense for two adults who understood that love was a luxury neither of them could afford right now. She would offer him financial stability, help with childcare, and a partnership that would benefit everyone involved. The girls would have a stable home, educational opportunities, and the kind of advantages that Rebecca's success could provide. David could perhaps even return to school, finish his degree, build the kind of future that his current circumstances made impossible. It was logical, practical, and mutually beneficial. Rebecca was confident that any reasonable person would see the wisdom in such an arrangement. The invitation came on expensive cardstock, hand-delivered to David's apartment building with Rebecca's business card attached. Emma found it slipped under their door when they returned from grocery shopping on Saturday morning, her small fingers tracing the embossed lettering. "What's this, Daddy?" she asked, holding up the cream-colored envelope. David read the elegant script with growing confusion. "Rebecca Walsh cordially invites the Martinez family to dinner at her home, Saturday evening at 6 o'clock. Casual attire welcome. Someone wants to have dinner with us," he told the girls, though his mind raced with questions. Why would Rebecca Walsh, with her spotless SUV and designer handbags, want to invite them to her home? "Is she the pretty lady from school pickup?" Sophia asked, looking up from her coloring book. "That's right, sweetheart." "Can we go, Daddy?" Emma bounced on her toes. "I've never been to a fancy house before." David studied the invitation again, noting the careful phrasing, the quality of the paper. Everything about Rebecca Walsh spoke of success and sophistication, worlds away from his small apartment with its second-hand furniture and carefully managed budget. But the girls were excited, and perhaps it would be good for them to see how successful people lived, to understand that such things were possible. Rebecca's house was everything David had expected and more. The sprawling 2-story colonial sat on a manicured lot in one of the city's most desirable neighborhoods, its windows gleaming in the late afternoon sun. Emma pressed her nose against the Honda's window as they pulled into the circular driveway. "Look at that garden, Daddy," Sophia whispered, pointing to the professionally maintained landscaping that David recognized as easily $10,000 worth of design and installation. Rebecca met them at the front door wearing what David suspected was her version of casual, a flowing blouse and perfectly fitted jeans that probably cost more than his monthly grocery budget. Her smile was warm and welcoming as she knelt to the girls' level. "Emma and Sophia, I'm so glad you could come. I have something special planned for dinner." The interior of the house was a study in controlled elegance. Hardwood floors gleamed under carefully positioned lighting, and every surface seemed designed for a magazine spread rather than actual living. The girls moved carefully, as if afraid their presence might disturb the perfection. During dinner, served on china that reflected the chandelier's light, Rebecca proved herself to be genuinely interested in the girls' lives. She asked thoughtful questions about school, remembered details from their previous brief conversations, and listened with the kind of attention that David rarely saw adults give to children. "Emma," Rebecca said, cutting her perfectly prepared salmon, "your father mentioned you're interested in science. What's your favorite experiment you've done?" "We made volcanoes at home," Emma replied, her shyness melting away. "But Daddy showed us how to make crystals too. He knows lots of science stuff." Rebecca's eyes shifted to David with new interest. "Really? What kind of science?" "Just things I picked up over the years," David deflected, uncomfortable with the scrutiny. "I like learning alongside the girls." After dinner, while the girls explored Rebecca's immaculate living room under strict instructions to be careful, she and David stood in her kitchen, the evening's conversation having revealed layers of compatibility that surprised them both. "David," Rebecca began, her voice taking on the professional tone he had heard her use during phone calls in the school parking lot, "I have something I'd like to discuss with you." David felt the weight of Rebecca's gaze as she led him to her home office, a room that spoke of success in every carefully chosen detail. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined one wall, filled with business texts and motivational biographies. Her desk, a massive piece of polished mahogany, held multiple monitors and the kind of ergonomic setup that cost more than David made in a month. "This is where I do most of my work," Rebecca said, settling into her leather chair with the confidence of someone accustomed to conducting important conversations. "I run a marketing consultancy. We handle campaigns for Fortune 500 companies." David nodded, uncertain why she was sharing this with him. "It's impressive," he said honestly. "I've been thinking about our conversation the other day," Rebecca continued, her fingers drumming lightly against the desk surface. "About balance, about what really matters. You have something I've been trying to figure out for years." From the living room came the sound of Emma's delighted laughter as she discovered Rebecca's collection of coffee table books about travel and architecture. Sophia's quieter voice followed, asking careful questions about the places in the photographs. "What's that?" David asked. "You make it look effortless," Rebecca said, leaning forward slightly. "The way you balance everything. Work, parenting, keeping those girls so grounded and happy. I watch you at pickup every day, and I see something I've never been able to achieve." David shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "We just take it one day at a time." "But that's exactly what I mean," Rebecca pressed. "You have this natural ability to prioritize what actually matters. In my world, everyone talks about work-life balance, but they're all miserable. Stressed, divorced, their kids barely know them. You've figured out something they haven't." Through the doorway, David could see his daughters examining a large art book, their heads bent together in concentration. Emma pointed to something on the page while Sophia traced the image with her finger, their voices a soft murmur of shared discovery. "I had good help," David said quietly. "Before Maria died, we were a team. I'm just trying to keep doing what we started together." Something flickered across Rebecca's face, an emotion too quick to identify. "That's exactly what I'm talking about," she said. "You understand partnership. Real partnership, not just the surface stuff." Rebecca stood and moved to the window overlooking her backyard, where a pool sparkled in the evening light, surrounded by professional landscaping that David recognized from high-end design magazines. The silence stretched between them, filled with the distant sounds of his daughters exploring this world so different from their own. "David, I have a proposition for you," Rebecca said finally, turning back to face him. "I've been thinking about this for weeks, and I believe it could solve problems for both of us." David waited, sensing the importance of whatever was coming next. "You need stability, financial security, someone to help with the girls," Rebecca continued, her voice taking on the persuasive quality he imagined she used with clients. "I need something too. A family." The appearance of having figured out what everyone else seems to manage so easily. She moved closer, her expression earnest and businesslike. We're both practical people, David. We both understand that sometimes the best solutions aren't the most romantic ones, but they're the most sensible. In the living room, Sophia's voice drifted toward them, reading aloud from one of the picture books she had found, her careful pronunciation making David's chest tighten with pride. The following week brought an unexpected rhythm to their lives. Rebecca began appearing at the coffee shop where David sometimes took the girls on Saturday mornings, always with a genuine smile and thoughtful questions about their week. She remembered that Emma loved science and Sophia preferred quiet activities, bringing small gifts that showed careful attention to their individual personalities. David found himself looking forward to these encounters despite his initial wariness. Rebecca listened when the girls talked, really listened in a way that reminded him how rare such focused attention had become in their lives. Most adults either ignored children completely or spoke to them with the patronizing tone reserved for pets. On Saturday morning, as Emma explained her latest school project with animated gestures, Rebecca caught David's eye across the small cafe table. She was wearing jeans and a simple sweater, her usual polish softened into something more approachable. For a moment, he glimpsed the woman beneath the successful businesswoman, someone who seemed genuinely charmed by his daughter's innocence. You know, Rebecca said, stirring sugar into her coffee, I've been thinking about what you said the other night. About taking things one day at a time. David raised an eyebrow. What about it? I realize I've never actually done that, Rebecca admitted. Every decision I make is part of some larger strategic plan. 5-year goals, quarterly projections, return on investment calculations. But watching you with Emma and Sophia, I see something different. What part of this story resonates most with you so far? Have you ever found yourself in a situation where someone saw your life completely differently than you saw it yourself? Share your thoughts with us. Emma looked up from her coloring book. Daddy says we can't plan everything. Sometimes the best things happen when you're not expecting them. Rebecca's smile faltered slightly. That's very wise, Emma. That afternoon, David worked in Rebecca's backyard, having accepted her offer to maintain her landscaping at a rate significantly above his usual fee. It was honest work, but being here felt different somehow. The girls played in her pool under Rebecca's watchful supervision while David trimmed hedges and planted seasonal flowers. He paused in his work, watching through the large windows as Rebecca helped Sophia with her swimming technique. There was something almost hungry in the way Rebecca absorbed every interaction, as if she were studying for a test she desperately wanted to pass. Later, as the sun began to set and the girls wrapped themselves in towels, Rebecca approached David where he knelt beside her flower beds. The soil was rich and well-maintained, the kind of growing medium that cost extra but produced exceptional results. David, there's something I need to ask you, Rebecca said, her voice carrying a nervous edge he hadn't heard before. He looked up, noting the way she clasped her hands in front of her, the careful control of her expression. Okay. I've been watching you, watching your family, for weeks now, Rebecca began, then immediately corrected herself. Not watching exactly, but observing. Appreciating. What you've built with your daughters, the way you've kept them so grounded and happy despite everything you've been through. David set down his gardening tools and stood, brushing dirt from his knees. Rebecca, what are you trying to say? She took a deep breath, her businesswoman composure returning. I want to help, David. I want to be part of what you've created. I think we could be good partners, you and I, good for each other, good for the girls. The evening air seemed to still around them, even the distant sound of traffic fading as David processed her words. In the background, Emma and Sophia's voices carried from the pool area where they were collecting their toys, their innocent chatter a stark contrast to the weight of the conversation unfolding between the adults. David's hands stilled on the gardening tools as he studied Rebecca's face, searching for the meaning behind her carefully chosen words. The evening light cast long shadows across her perfectly maintained yard, and somewhere in the distance, a lawn mower hummed its suburban song. Partners, he repeated slowly. Rebecca nodded, her confidence building as she found her footing in familiar territory. Think about it, David. You're working yourself to exhaustion trying to provide for the girls on a landscaper's salary. Meanwhile, I have resources, connections, opportunities that I'm not even using because I don't have anyone to share them with. Emma's voice carried from the pool area, calling for David to come see how long she could hold her breath underwater. He waved acknowledgement but remained focused on Rebecca, sensing that this conversation was heading somewhere he wasn't prepared for. What exactly are you suggesting? He asked. Rebecca smoothed her hair, a gesture David was beginning to recognize as her way of gathering composure. I'm suggesting we help each other. I could provide financial stability for you and the girls. Better schools, college funds, opportunities. In return, I get what I've been missing. Which is a family, Rebecca said simply. The girls would have a mother figure, someone who genuinely cares about their well-being. You would have support, both financial and practical. We could be a team. David felt something cold settle in his stomach. Rebecca, are you talking about marriage? I'm talking about partnership, she clarified quickly. A practical arrangement that benefits everyone involved. We're both adults, David. We both understand that the fairy tale version of love is a luxury that people in our situations can't always afford. From the pool area came the sound of Sophia's careful voice explaining to Emma the proper way to exit the water safely, her serious tone making David smile despite the surreal nature of his current conversation. You've thought about this, David said, not quite a question. I've researched it, Rebecca admitted. I know about Maria, about what you gave up when she died. Your engineering degree, your career plans. With my resources, you could finish school, build the life you were meant to have. David looked toward his daughters, who were now sitting on the pool's edge, their legs dangling in the water as they examined something Sophia had found at the bottom of the shallow end. Their complete absorption in their small discovery, their unconscious trust that he would handle whatever adult complications might arise, made his chest tight. The girls adore you already, Rebecca continued, following his gaze. And honestly, I've learned more about what it means to be happy in the past 3 weeks than I have in years. You've shown me something I didn't even know I was missing. David turned back to her, noting the vulnerability that had crept into her voice despite her businesslike approach. Rebecca, I appreciate everything you're saying, but this isn't how these things work. Why not? She challenged. Why does it have to be complicated? We get along well, the girls like me, I can provide things you can't. It makes sense. In the growing dusk, automatic sprinklers began their evening cycle, sending arcs of water across sections of the lawn with quiet efficiency. David watched the systematic coverage, the way every inch received exactly what it needed, nothing more, nothing less. The drive home was quiet, the girls exhausted from their evening of swimming and exploration. Emma had fallen asleep against the window, her damp hair curling around her face, while Sophia sat thoughtfully in her booster seat, processing the experience of Rebecca's house. Daddy, Sophia said softly, her voice careful in the way it became when she was working through something important. Miss Rebecca's house is very big. It is, David agreed, glancing at her in the rearview mirror. Why doesn't she have any family pictures? Sophia continued. Grandma always says pictures make a house feel like home. David considered this observation, remembering how Rebecca's house, despite its perfection, had felt more like a showroom than a home. Maybe she just likes things simple, sweetheart. But you always say our pictures make our apartment happy, even when it's messy, Sophia persisted with the logic that only children possessed. That night, after the girls were asleep, David sat at his small kitchen table with a cup of coffee and the bills that never seemed to decrease. Rebecca's words echoed in his mind as he calculated the cost of Emma's upcoming school supplies and Sophia's new shoes. The practical part of him, the part that had learned to stretch every dollar and plan for every contingency, could see the logic in what she was suggesting. But logic felt cold against the memory of Maria's hand in his, the way she used to hum while cooking dinner, the 1,000 small intimacies that had made their modest life feel rich beyond measure. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. David opened his apartment door to find his mother-in-law, Carmen, standing in the hallway with her arms full of groceries and her expression full of concern. "Mijo," she said, pushing past him into the apartment, "I brought ingredients for the girls' favorite breakfast. And we need to talk." Carmen had been making weekly visits since Maria's death, her way of staying connected to her granddaughters and ensuring David wasn't drowning under the weight of single parenthood. She moved through his kitchen with practiced efficiency, pulling out ingredients for the elaborate pancakes that always made the girls squeal with delight. "The woman from the school pickup called me," Carmen said without preamble, cracking eggs into a bowl. David's coffee mug stopped halfway to his lips. "What?" "Rebecca Walsh," Carmen continued, her tone carefully neutral. "She wanted to know about Maria, about you, about what kind of father you are. She said she was considering offering you a job opportunity. Have you ever been in a situation where someone else made assumptions about what you needed most? Sometimes people see our circumstances and think they know what would fix everything. But do they really understand what matters?" David set down his mug and leaned against the counter. "What did you tell her?" "The truth," Carmen replied, beginning to whisk the batter with more force than necessary. "That you're the best father those girls could ask for. That you've sacrificed everything to keep them stable and happy. That anyone who wants to be part of their lives better understand what they're walking into." "Abuela," Emma's sleepy voice called from the hallway as she padded toward them in her pajamas, drawn by the familiar sounds and sense of Carmen's cooking. "Mi amor," Carmen opened her arms wide, and Emma rushed into them with the complete trust that only grandmothers could inspire. "Are you making the special pancakes?" Emma asked, rubbing her eyes. "With extra blueberries, just for you," Carmen promised, but her eyes remained on David over Emma's head, a question lingering in her gaze that he wasn't ready to answer. Carmen's revelation about Rebecca's phone call lingered in David's mind throughout the following week. During his lunch breaks at work, while trimming hedges in the sweltering heat, he found himself analyzing every interaction they'd had, searching for signs of the calculation that now seemed obvious in retrospect. On Thursday evening, Rebecca appeared at his apartment door holding a bottle of wine and wearing an expression that David was beginning to recognize as her version of nervous determination. The girls welcomed her with the easy enthusiasm of children who had come to associate her presence with treats and attention. "I brought something for dinner," Rebecca announced, producing takeout containers from an expensive restaurant downtown. "I thought we could talk while the girls eat." Emma clapped her hands together. "Is it the pasta from that place with the fancy name?" "Something even better," Rebecca promised, and David noted how naturally she had learned to speak to his daughters, how her usual corporate polish softened when she addressed them directly. During dinner, Rebecca regaled the girls with stories from her business travels, describing cities they had only seen in picture books with the vivid detail of someone who had experienced them firsthand. Emma hung on every word while Sophia listened with her characteristic thoughtfulness, occasionally asking questions that revealed her deeper processing of the information. After the girls were settled in the living room with a movie, Rebecca helped David clear the dishes, their movements in his small kitchen requiring a careful choreography that spoke to how often she had been visiting recently. "David," Rebecca began, setting down the plates with deliberate precision, "I've been thinking more about our conversation at my house." He had been expecting this moment, sensing that her increased attention over the past week had been building toward something significant. "Rebecca, before you say anything else, I need you to understand something about my girls." "Of course," she said quickly. "They're amazing children. You should be incredibly proud." "They are," David agreed, leaning against the counter to face her fully. "But they're also children who lost their mother when they were 4 and 6 years old. They're just now starting to feel secure again, to trust that the people they love won't disappear." "I would never hurt them," Rebecca said, her voice carrying genuine conviction. "I believe that," David replied. "But they're not accessories to make someone else's life feel complete. They're not a solution to loneliness or a way to prove to your family that you've got it all figured out." Rebecca's face flushed slightly. "That's not what this is about." "Isn't it?" David asked gently. You've been very clear about what you need, Rebecca. A family. The appearance of having what everyone else has. But what about what they need? From the living room came the sound of Emma's laughter at something happening in the movie, followed by Sophia's softer giggle. The sound seemed to strengthen David's resolve. You're a successful woman, Rebecca, David continued. You've built something impressive with your business, your independence. But my girls don't need someone who sees them as part of a strategic plan. Rebecca moved closer, her expression shifting into the persuasive mode David had witnessed during her phone calls. You're misunderstanding my intentions, David. I genuinely care about Emma and Sophia. I care about you too. I think you believe that, David said quietly. But caring about someone and loving them aren't the same thing. And my daughters deserve to be loved, not just cared about in a practical way. The movie soundtrack swelled from the living room, some animated adventure reaching its climactic moment while David and Rebecca stood in his modest kitchen, the weight of unspoken possibilities hanging between them like a bridge neither was quite ready to cross. The conversation in the kitchen ended without resolution, Rebecca departing with a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. David spent the following days replaying their exchange, wondering if he had been too harsh, too protective. Perhaps Rebecca's practical approach wasn't wrong, just different from what he had known with Maria. Saturday morning found him at the community center where Emma had enrolled in a youth art program. David sat on a bench outside the classroom, watching through the window as his daughter carefully mixed watercolors, her tongue poking out in concentration. Other parents chatted around him, but he found himself lost in thought until a familiar voice interrupted his reverie. "Beautiful morning, isn't it?" Rebecca said, settling beside him on the bench uninvited. David looked around, confused. "What are you doing here?" "I volunteer here sometimes," Rebecca explained, though something in her tone suggested this might be a recent development. "Art therapy programs for underserved kids. When I heard Emma was taking classes here, I thought it might be nice to support the program." Through the window, Emma looked up and waved enthusiastically when she spotted Rebecca. David watched his daughter's face light up with genuine pleasure, and felt his protective instincts war with his desire to see his children happy. "She's talented," Rebecca observed, nodding toward Emma's painting. "Has she always been artistic?" "Since she could hold a crayon," David replied. "Maria used to say Emma saw colors the rest of us missed." "Maria sounds like she was a wonderful mother," Rebecca said softly. "She was," David agreed, surprised by the genuine warmth in Rebecca's voice. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, watching the children work with intense focus on their projects. David found himself studying Rebecca's profile, noting how her usual sharp alertness had softened into something more contemplative. "David," Rebecca said eventually, her voice quieter than he had ever heard it, "I owe you an apology." "For what?" "For making you feel like I see your daughters as conveniences," Rebecca continued, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "That's not what I meant, but I understand how it sounded." David waited, sensing she had more to say. "The truth is, I've never been around children much," Rebecca admitted. "My sister has kids, but they barely know me. I built my career instead of relationships, and now I'm 34 and successful and completely alone." She turned to face him, and David was startled to see genuine uncertainty in her eyes. "When I watch you with Emma and Sophia, I see something I've been missing my entire life. Not just the family aspect, but the way you prioritize what actually matters." David studied her face, searching for the calculated businesswoman he had been expecting to find. Instead, he saw someone who seemed genuinely confused by her own emotions. "I don't know how to do this," Rebecca said quietly. "I don't know how to want something without trying to strategize my way into getting it. But watching the three of you together, I realize I've been approaching this all wrong." The art class ended with a burst of excited chatter as children gathered their supplies and proudly displayed their work. Emma emerged with a watercolor of their apartment building, complete with flowers in the window boxes that existed only in her imagination. "Look, Daddy," she called, holding up her painting. "I made our home, but I added a garden like Miss Rebecca's. David's throat tightened as he examined his daughter's vision of their life, somehow made more beautiful through her 80-year-old perspective. Rebecca leaned closer to admire the artwork, and David caught the subtle scent of her perfume mixed with something else, something vulnerable that hadn't been there before. The following week, Rebecca's behavior shifted in ways that David found both surprising and unsettling. She began appearing at the school pickup with homemade cookies for the girls, asking about their days with the intensity of someone genuinely invested in the answers. Her usual polished exterior remained, but underneath David sensed something more desperate, more urgent. On Wednesday afternoon, she approached him after the girls had climbed into his car, her expression serious in a way that made his stomach tighten with anticipation. "David, could we talk tonight?" she asked. "After the girls are asleep. It's important." He nodded, though every instinct told him to decline. Rebecca had been building toward something all week, her attention to his family becoming more focused, more deliberate. That evening, after Emma and Sophia had been tucked into bed with their usual ritual of stories and kisses, David found Rebecca waiting on his apartment steps. She held a manila folder in her hands and wore the kind of determined expression he associated with boardroom presentations. "Come in," he said, stepping aside to let her pass. Rebecca moved to his small living room and sat on the edge of the couch, the folder balanced on her knees like armor. "David, I've been thinking about everything you said the other night, about love versus caring, about what the girls need." "Okay," David said carefully, settling into the chair across from her. "You're right that they deserve love," Rebecca continued, her voice taking on the rehearsed quality of a prepared speech. "But love takes time to develop, doesn't it? What they need immediately is stability, security, opportunities." She opened the folder and withdrew a series of documents that David recognized as financial statements, school brochures, and what appeared to be legal paperwork. "I had my attorney draw up some preliminary documents," Rebecca said, her businesswoman confidence returning. "A prenuptial agreement that protects your interests and the girls' futures, college fund establishment papers, trust documentation." David stared at the papers spread across his coffee table. "Rebecca, what exactly are you asking me?" She took a deep breath, her perfectly manicured hands smoothing her skirt. "I'm asking you to marry me, David. I'm asking you to let me help raise Emma and Sophia. I'm asking you to let me be part of your family." The words hung in the air between them, formal and strange in the modest living room where his daughter's artwork covered the refrigerator and toys were scattered across the carpet despite his efforts to maintain order. "I know it's not traditional," Rebecca continued quickly, as if rushing through her presentation before he could object. "But we get along well, the girls like me, and I can provide things you can't. Private schools, college funds, travel opportunities, experiences they'll never have otherwise." David looked down at the papers, noting the legal language that attempted to quantify love and commitment in terms of financial obligations and custody arrangements. "Rebecca," David said quietly, "do you hear yourself right now?" She blinked, her confidence wavering slightly. "What do you mean?" "You're talking about my daughters like they're a business acquisition," David continued, his voice remaining gentle despite the words. "College funds and trust documents and prenuptial agreements. But those things matter," Rebecca protested. "Security matters. Opportunities matter." "You're absolutely right," David agreed. "They do matter. But they're not what makes a family." David stood slowly, his movement deliberate and careful, the way he approached everything that mattered deeply to him. Rebecca remained seated on his couch, surrounded by her carefully prepared documents, waiting for his response to her calculated proposal with the expectant confidence of someone accustomed to successful negotiations. "Rebecca," David began, his voice carrying a quiet authority that seemed to fill the small living room, "I want you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you." She nodded, her pen poised over the legal documents as if preparing to take notes on his concerns so she could address them systematically. 3 years ago, I held my wife's hand while she died in a hospital room that smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams," David said, his words measured and clear. "I promised her that I would love our daughters enough for both of us. Not provide for them, not secure their futures, not give them opportunities. Love them. Rebecca's pen stopped moving. Emma was 5 when her mother died, David continued, walking to the mantel where a photo of Maria smiled from a simple wooden frame. She asked me every night for 6 months if Mommy was coming home, and every night I had to explain again that some things can't be fixed with money or planning or good intentions. The silence in the room was complete except for the soft hum of the air conditioner and the distant murmur of his daughters' voices from their bedroom where they were supposed to be sleeping but were undoubtedly whispering secrets to each other. Sophia stopped talking for 3 weeks after the funeral, David said, his fingers tracing the edge of Maria's photograph. 3 weeks of silence because a 6-year-old was trying to figure out how to exist in a world where the person who loved her most had simply vanished. Rebecca's folder had slipped from her lap to the floor, the financial documents scattering across the carpet like fallen leaves. "You want to marry me so you can help raise my girls," David said, turning back to face her. "You've prepared trust funds and college accounts and legal protections. You've researched the best schools and calculated the return on investment of providing them with opportunities." Rebecca opened her mouth to speak, but David continued with the same gentle authority. "But you've never asked me what they dream about at night," David said. "You don't know that Emma still sleeps with the teddy bear her mother gave her, or that Sophia writes letters to Maria and hides them under her mattress because she thinks it might hurt my feelings if she talks about missing her mother." Rebecca's face had gone pale, her usual composure cracking like expensive veneer under unexpected pressure. "You don't know that Emma wants to be a scientist who discovers new planets, or that Sophia wants to teach little kids how to read because she remembers how safe she felt when Maria read to her," David said, his voice growing stronger with each word. "Marriage isn't a business partnership, Rebecca," David said, kneeling to gather the scattered documents from his floor. "It's not about strategic advantages or mutual benefit arrangements. It's about two people choosing to love each other's broken places and build something beautiful together." He stood and placed the papers gently on the coffee table between them. "My daughters don't need your money, Rebecca," David said, his words cutting through the silence like a blade made of kindness. "They need someone who will love them not for what they can provide or represent, but for who they are in their pajamas at 7 in the morning when their hair is messy and they're crying because they can't find their favorite socks." Rebecca sat completely motionless, her mouth slightly open, every word of her carefully prepared presentation forgotten in the face of David's quiet devastation of her entire approach. The silence stretched between them for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Rebecca sat frozen on David's couch, her carefully constructed world of strategic planning and calculated outcomes shattered by the simple truth of his words. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I never thought about their pajamas," she said, staring down at her hands. "Or their favorite socks." David settled back into his chair, the anger that had driven his speech replaced by something gentler, more patient. "They're just little girls, Rebecca. They don't need someone to manage their futures. They need someone to love their present." Rebecca looked up, and David was startled to see tears threatening the corners of her eyes. "I don't know how to do that," she admitted. "I don't know how to love without trying to fix or improve or optimize." From the bedroom hallway came the soft padding of small feet, and Sophia appeared in the doorway wearing her favorite nightgown, the one with stars that glowed in the dark. "Daddy, I can't sleep," she said, rubbing her eyes. "Can you tell me the story about Mama and the fireflies?" "Of course, baby girl," David said, opening his arms as Sophia climbed into his lap with the trusting ease of a child who had never doubted her father's availability. Rebecca watched this interaction with the intensity of someone witnessing something she had never seen before. David's entire demeanor changed when Sophia settled against him, his protective love so tangible it seemed to warm the room. "Once upon a time," David began, his voice taking on the rhythmic cadence of a story told many times before, "your mama and I went for a walk on a summer evening just like this one." Sophia nestled deeper into his embrace, her eyes already growing heavy as the familiar words washed over her. "The fireflies were dancing in the tall grass," David continued, "and Mama said they looked like tiny stars that had come down to visit the earth. She caught one very gently in her hands and whispered a secret to it before letting it fly away. What was the secret? Sophia asked sleepily, though she knew the answer by heart. She told the firefly about a little girl who wasn't born yet, but who would someday love watching stars and asking important questions and making the world brighter just by being in it, David said, pressing a kiss to the top of Sophia's head. Rebecca's breath caught audibly, and David looked up to find her watching them with an expression of wonder that seemed to surprise her as much as it did him. That little girl was you, wasn't she? Sophia murmured, already half asleep. That little girl was you, David confirmed, and Sophia smiled against his chest. After Sophia had been carried back to bed and tucked in with extra kisses, David returned to find Rebecca standing by his living room window, looking out at the parking lot where security lights cast pools of yellow illumination across the asphalt. I've been approaching this all wrong, haven't I? She said without turning around. You've been approaching it the only way you know how, David replied. There's nothing wrong with wanting to help, Rebecca. But love isn't something you can plan or purchase or negotiate. Rebecca turned to face him, and in the soft lamplight, she looked younger somehow, less armored. Then teach me, she said simply. David smiled, the first genuine smile he had given her since this conversation began. It doesn't work that way either, he said gently. Love isn't something you learn from someone else. It's something you discover about yourself. If this story has touched your heart tonight, let us know where you're listening from around the world. Sometimes the most important lessons come from the smallest voices and the quietest moments. Rebecca gathered her papers with hands that trembled slightly, the legal documents that had seemed so important an hour ago now feeling like artifacts from a different life. At the door, she paused and looked back at David. Thank you, she said. For showing me what I was really asking for. After she left, David stood in his quiet living room, surrounded by the gentle chaos of family life, and felt something shift in his understanding of the evening. Perhaps Rebecca's journey was just beginning, and perhaps that was exactly as it should be.